Nachem Amodi, Oimer Madlikin Bechelav, Mavushal Vachacham, Oimer Echad Mavushal Vechad Shein Mavushal Ein Madlikin Boy. Nachem Amodi says that you can use boiled chelav mavushal, cooked chelav, to light Shabbos left with. So, because when chelav is boiled, it becomes a liquor that can produce a steady flame, which will be fine. Only solid chelav that has not been boiled is forbidden. V'chacham Oimer Echad Mavushal Vechad Shein Mavushal Ein Madlikin, but the Chacham say that no chelav whatsoever can be used. The Chacham agree that chelav mavushal produces a steady flame. There's a concern, however, that people might think that if liquid chelav is mutter, so solid chelav is also mutter. So it's a chelav thing. It's a gzera that people might come to be matter chelav in other areas, so we have to be careful about that. The Tanna Kama simply said chelav without any qualification, which implies that he forbids chelav in all its forms. So the Chachamim seem to be repeating the sheet of the Tanna Kama. The Gemara on Shabbos, Chav Daled Amud Beis, explains that there's a difference between them. They disagree about using boiled chelim, in which a small amount of permitted oil was mixed. The Gemara, adds, however, that it's not clear who permits its use and who forbids it, meaning who holds what's mutter and who holds what's asur. Mishnah Beis. Ein Madlikin b'shemen sreifa b'yantif. We mentioned in the first Mishnah that you can't use shemen sreifa. So we're also discussing about what you're allowed to use on Yantif. The same way we light Neiros on Shabbos, we also light Neiros on Yantif. So on Yantif we may not kindle any light with Shemen Sreifa because it's prohibited to burn Truma Tmeya on Yantif. Why is that? Midini Atar, if a carbon Mekentameh must be destroyed by burning, may not be burnt on Yantif. The Chacham extended this issa to include Truma, which is Tameh. So the Deraisa would be real Kachim and the Rabbanan is Truma. Therefore, when Friday is a Yantif and Erev Shabbos is on Yantif, so Shemen Sreifa may not be used as fuel even in a Shabbos lamp. Rabbi Shmuel says, Ein Madlikin b'Idran mepnei kved Shabbos. We may not sin Shabbos left with Idran. What's Idran? It's a residue of pitch. It's a clear, oily liquid in contrast to pitch, which is thick. This is a clear, oily liquid. V'reicha Rabbi Yoser, and has a very foul smell. Because burning Itran produces an extremely foul odor, which does not befit the honor of Shabbos. If Itran is used to light the room where the Suda is going to be eaten, the participants might leave the room because of the foul odor and eat in a place that it's not lit. They would thus fail to observe the mitzvah of honoring Shabbos. Rishmal specifies the reason for Kavod Shabbos, because that's the only basis for answering Itran. The reason that the fuels listed in the previous Mishnah are disqualified because one might tilt the lamp does not apply to Itran because its flame doesn't flicker. It has a good flame, just gives off a very bad smell. The Chachamim are matir with all types of oils. B'shemen shum, b'shemen sesame oil, b'shemen agoizim, walnut oil, b'shemen tzneinois, radish oil, b'shemen dogim, fish oil, because it doesn't smell too bad, or they were used to that. B'shemen pakuais are a type of gourd. The last mitzvaris, ArtScroll titles it as a kalasinth oil, which is a member of the gourd family. Be'idran, which was mentioned earlier, ubeneft, with naphtha. Naphtha also gives off a bad smell when it's burnt. Nevertheless, the Chacham are matter both of these fuels because they argue in Rabbi Shmuel that they're not worried that the odor might drive people away from the room in which the Suda Shabbos is being conducted. Although Rabbi Shmuel asks Itran for this reason, he says that naft is permitted because the smell is not as strong. Rabbi Tarfon says that we cannot kindle with anything except for olive oil. Rabbi Tarfon requires the use of olive oil because it's drawn to the wick more easily than any other oil, producing the clearest and most beautiful flame. Even those who disagree with Rabbi Tarfon and allow the use of other oils, everyone's masking that it is lechatchila to use shemen zayis. Okay, Mishnah Gimel. Anything that comes out of a tree can be used. Ein madlikin may not be used to kindle Shabbos left with elapishtan, except for a wick of flax, which is permitted. Some parts of a tree can be crushed and spun and made into wicks, which some of them were actually mentioned in the first Mishnah. So such wicks do not absorb oil easily, and their flames flicker, which disqualifies them from the use of Shabbos lights. However, wicks made from combed flax or linen cloth, which is made from flax, may be used for this purpose because the flame they produce is steady. Wicks made from uncombed flax are disqualified, as we mentioned in Mishnah Aleph. Although flax does not grow on a tree, in Sefer Yeshua, the pasuk says when Pinchas and Kalev went to spy in Eretz Yisrael, it says that Rachav hid them b'pishtei ha'etz. She hid them in the flax of the tree. The Tana therefore felt that it was necessary to teach that flax is excluded from the general statement about the products of a tree. It's interesting because Chazal over there, by the story of Yeshua and Kalev, that they use the chevel, v'teridam bechevel ba'arach haloin, that it's miramas to the shalosh mitzvahs of Nashim, and one of them is Hadlakas Neiros, which is interesting. So kol yaitz ben eita medlikin by ela pishtan, v'kol yaitz ben eita nemetamet mas oilam ela pishtan. The Mishnah adds another halachic difference between most tree products and flax. A roof that's made of anything that comes from a tree does not become tameh with oil hameis, ela pishtan, except for a roof made out of flax. When a person or a keli is in the same tent as a mace, the person or object becomes tameh, which is referred to as tumas oilam. Furthermore, the roof itself becomes tameh as well. The Mishnah teaches that there is a difference between flax and wood in this regard. If the roof is made of flax, it becomes tameh. One made of wood does not become tameh, though it too spreads tumah to people and items beneath it. This distinction is derived from the material used for the Mishkan. The Torah uses the word oil, which can either be defined as a tent or a covering in connection with the tumas oilim, and in connection with the covering of the Mishkan, thereby linking the two subjects. The only product of a tree contained in the Mishkan's covering was linen, which was made from flax. Hence, only a roof of flax cannot become tameh, whereas a roof of wood cannot. Psilas habeged shekiplo v'loy hivhava. The Mishnah discusses whether a wick made from a cloth of a particular size is fit to use for Shabbos lecht. The Torah says that a beged can become tameh. The word beged literally means a garment, but in this context, it includes any piece of cloth that's large enough to be useful. The smallest cloth that meets this requirement measures 3 by 3 etzba'os, where it can be used to patch up clothing. This is used in other areas, not just in Masechta Shabbos, discussed in Masechta Kelim and throughout the Taras. The Gemara Sukkah uses it. The Mishnah's cases of a wick formed by twisting a cloth that measures exactly 3 by 3 etzba'os. The following machlekes concerns a wick made of a minimally sized beged, which is exactly 3 by 3 etzba'os. The one has twisted into a wick but is not singed. The tip of the new wick is typically singed to make the wick easier to light. This was not done to the wick discussed in our Mishnah. The Mishnah must be referring to a wick that was twisted into shape before Yantiv, because it's also to do so on Yantiv. I guess it would be also to do it on Shabbos as well. But the Rav says that we're talking about the Yantiv Shechali as Erev Shabbos Eskinon, the Shaykh Be'isur Muktzah, Ve'im Asikim Shivrei Kelim Shishru B'Biyam Davlu Neilad. Aha. Zok the Rav like this. That we must be talking about Yom Tov Shechali as Erev Shabbos. Yom Tov fell out on Erev Shabbos because there's the Isra of Muktzah. Meaning there's the Isra of Muktzah and Yom Tov just like there's the Isra of Muktzah on Shabbos. Ve'im Asikim Shivrei Kelim Shishru B'Biyam. You can't use Shivrei Kelim, broken kelim, to light with that broke on that day because it's a problem of Neilad. Rabbi Lezer Emer Tmeya. Rabbi Lezer says that since it's twisted and not singed, it's still a beg and it can become tameh. Rabbi Lezer holds that twisting the cloth does not cause it to lose its status as a beged, rather to become a non-beged, it must be singed as well. So it remains, because it was loy hivava, he didn't singe it yet, so then it's susceptible to tumah. And therefore, when Friday is the Yantif, we may not kindle the Shabbos lamp with it. The reason for this Isser is that as soon as the wick is gonna catch fire, it becomes slightly smaller than 3 by 3 etzba'os and changes from a beged into a non-beged. Since it changed from one halachic entity into another, it falls under the category of neilad, which is a newborn item, which we discussed in the Hakdama, is a type of muktzah, may not be used in Yantif. Once it's muktzah, one may not continue to hold the flame to it as required when lighting Neiros Shabbos. Therefore, such a wick may not be used in a Shabbos lamp or Yantif. From Kiva Imer Tahira, Rabbi Kiva says it cannot become tameh because it stopped being a beged as soon as it was twisted into a wick. Rabbi Kiva maintains that when a piece of cloth is twisted into a wick, the cloth loses its status as a beged, even without being singed, because it's no longer a beged, it cannot become tameh. The mere act of twisting it into a wick takes it away from being a beged, Madlikin, and therefore we may kindle Shabbos lights with it even on Friday that's a Yontif. Since it has already ceased to be a beged before it was lit, the halacha doesn't change upon being kindled, so it doesn't become muktzah at that point, and may continue to be used on Yontif. Mishnah Dalet. L'yikav odom shveres shal beya v'maleno shemen v'yitnen al pi haner. Extinguishing a fire, putting out a fire is one of the lamitas malachas. One who removes oil from a little lamp of Shabbos is going to be chayav for this malacha, even though he did not directly put out the fire, because he made the flame go out sooner than it would have otherwise. To prevent people from removing oil from a lamp, and thus being mechal Shabbos, Chachamim answered using certain types of lamps on Shabbos. So a person may not make a hole in an empty eggshell, fill it with oil, and place it on the mouth of a lamp, so that the oil in the eggshell, b'shvil shetehem and atefes, so that the oil in the eggshell will drip into the lamp and fuel the flame. Lamps in those times typically consisted of a covered bowl with a short tube at one end, through which the wick was extended. Oil was poured through the lamp through a hole in the mouth on the top. In the Mishnah's case, an eggshell was placed in the hole to serve as a reservoir, from which oil would drip into the lamp. So the Chachamim answered this arrangement because they were concerned that one might remove some oil from the eggshell. Since the oil was in the process being used to fuel the flame, removing it is asam deraisa from the malacha of mechaba because it causes the flame to go out sooner. This concern applies only with respect to the oil that's in the eggshell and not in the lamp itself, because you're not taking anything out of the lamp, you're taking it out of the eggshell. Since the oil is in a different container than the lit wick, people might mistakenly assume that taking it is not considered an act of mechaba. As for the oil in the lamp itself, however, there's little risk that a person will take it because it's common knowledge that doing so is usur. So if a lamp does not have a reservoir, meaning another keli that's attached to it that's causing it to drip down, and all its oil is in the bowl of the lamp itself, the Rabbanon were not geyser its use on Shabbos. Va'afilu hi shel cheres, even if it's made out of pottery. Well, why should that make a nafkamina? Zogt the Mishnah Vayter. Such a lamp is forbidden not only if the reservoir of oil is an eggshell, but even if it's made of earthenware. Although an earthen container is not clean, and the oil that has been in it is not fit to use for food, there's still a concern that one might remove some of it. Although one would not take this oil to use for food, he might take it for some of his other needs. Rabbi Yehuda Mater. Rabbi Yehuda permits using a lamp with a separate reservoir, whether it's made of an eggshell or earthenware, because in his opinion, people are unlikely to remove oil from it, and there's no need for exerit to prevent them from doing so. Rabbi Yehuda reasons that since the oil is clearly dripping from the reservoir into the lamp, people will realize that the oil fused the lamp, and no one lahedi is going to go do mechaba on Shabbos. It's only if you think it may not be mechaba that you could get away with it. However, if the craftsman who made the lamp attached to the reservoir to the bowl when he first made it, everyone is made that it's mutter to be used with b'neishu kli echad because it's one keli. Because in this case, it's all one keli, the reservoir is part of the lamp, and in this situation, a person will certainly realize that the oil is meant for the lamp and may not be removed. So it's not necessary to make a gzera on this type. A person may not fill a bowl with oil, place it beside a lamp, and place the unlit end of the wick into it, meaning that the type of nair that they used was a lamp that had a tube sticking out, and then there was a bowl which was mostly covered with a big hole in the middle of that. So instead of leaving the wick in the bottom of the keli, he draws the wick out of the big hole in the middle and schleps it into a bowl, another bowl sitting next to it. That's full of oil to make the wick last longer. So the wick will draw oil from the bowl into the lamp. Here too the Chachamim were concerned that one might remove oil from the bowl and perform the malacha of mechaba. Rabbi Yehuda permits this arrangement of these kelim as well, because as explained before, he does not consider it likely that a person will remove any oil. Mishnah Hey. The sugya of the following Mishnah is going to be talking about malacha sheni tzrich legufa, a malacha that's not needed for the defined purpose. As we explained in the Hakdama, malacha sheni tzrich legufa is if a person transfers does havara, he does a malacha of hitzah, not because he wants it in the second rishus, because he just wants it out of the first rishus. So the halacha for such a malacha is a machlekes tanoim. The Mishnah in Perek Yud brings a case of somebody who carries a mace from his house into Rosh Hashanah, where his kavanah is just to get the mace out of his house. So Reb Shimon paskins that he's pater because the malacha shein tzrich l'gufa. Reb Yehuda holds that he's chayiv. So our Mishnah is going to bring a similar machlekes. This machlekes is only midini deraisa, but everyone's moida that such a malacha is also midrabanan. So hamachabes haner, somebody who puts out a fire, somebody who puts out a candle because he fears an attack on his life, because the goyim who do not permit lighting lamps on their festivals. Some Persian religious sects in Talmudic times answered lighting lamps on their festivals in any place except their houses worship. They worshipped fire and therefore strictly controlled its use. The Mishnah speaks of a person who extinguishes a lamp so that the followers of its religion will not attack him, which we find kama places throughout the Gemara. On Daf Yud Aleph we find it on Daf Mem Aleph or so, and even in Hilchas Chanukah we find b'shas hasakana menicha al shulchan v'dayai. That's also because they did not allow them to make any fire mipnei listim, or he fears that bandits may attack him if they see him, or mipnei ruach ra. He wants to save the life of someone who's suffering from mental anguish. A patient suffers from severe life-threatening mental condition that causes him extreme anguish unless he sits in the dark, probably some type of depression, some type of marish chayra. But if it's that so that a dangerously ill person can fall asleep, he's pater in these 4 cases. In each of these situations, the only way he can prevent the danger is by putting out the light. Therefore, everyone agrees that extinguishing is permitted, since saving a life, there's a chiyuv of a chai behem over here, and he's going to be pater. And over here it's going to be pater or mutter because it's bikuach nefesh. Masha'in came in the rest of the cases where we say pater, we mean pater avalasar. Kichos ala ner, kichos ala shemen, kichos ala psila chayev. However, if a person puts out the flame to save the lamp from cracking due to the heat to save the oil, or he wants to save the wick, so then he's going to be chayiv. According to this Tana, the Torah asks a malacha shein tzrich l'gufa. For this reason, he paskins that a person is going to be chayiv in the last 3 cases. If he's chas ala ner, chas ala shemen, or chas ala psila, even though the act of extinguishing was done to prevent loss, he deems a person pater in the first 4 cases because he's misyarem, mipnei goyim, mipnei listim, mipnei ruach ra, or mipnei achayla sheisha, because it's necessary to save a life, and saving a life is going to be doiches Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi pater b'kula, and Rabbi Yossi says he's pater in all the cases. Chutz min apsila b'nei shroisa pecha. Besides when he wants to save the wick because he intends to make charcoal. If one lights a wick and then extinguishes it to turn the tip of the wick into charcoal, this makes the wick easier to light in the future, and this was the extinguisher's intent, then he's going to be chayav because he's making a coal. According to Rabbi Yossi, the Torah is matter malacha she'ein tzrich l'gufa. So he holds that one is not mechuyev for putting out a fire to save the lamp, the wick, or the oil, and certainly to save a person's life, since the purpose is only the negative act of preventing loss. L'shitas Rabbi Yossi, one is chayav for performing the malacha of mechaba only if he has the positive purpose of creating charcoal. Mishnah Vav. Al sholish averis noshem meses b'shas hadosa. On account of 3 averis, women may die in childbirth. Since childbirth is a shas sakana, so the Gemara goes on to explain that there's a lot of puronus that could happen b'shas sakana. So what are the 3 mitzvahs? Al she'enin zehirus b'anido b'chalav ad lo kasaner. Because they're not careful in hilchas nida, and they're not careful about taking off challah, and they're not careful about lighting Shabbos. The women have this chiv of nida, and the mitzvah of challah and the mitzvah of neighbor Shabbos are also assigned to women because they attend to the relevant household tasks like baking bread and lighting lamps. And the Gemara is marich on all kinds of other averis, or the biddle of all kinds of other mitzvahs which cause all kinds of other puranos. The main thing is to try to be mekayim all the mitzvahs to the best of our ability with the right kavanas, so we don't lead ourselves into any of these issues. Now, the main Mishnah Zion, the main reason why the Pashtus we say this Mishnah Madlika for those who say it is because we're going to discuss certain things that have to be taken care of before Shabbos in his house. A person must say these 3 things in his house to his household members, to the members of his family, in Erev Shabbos, right before dark. And the Gemara says that he should say them b'nechusa. So people should want to listen to him. So this is time as a lesson. You want people to listen to you. You got to talk nicely to them. Divrei chachamim, b'nachas nishboim. Isartem, have you taken of meiser and truma from the food that we'll eat on Shabbos? Because Shabbos you can't take of meiser. Eravtem, did you make the erev that you need for Shabbos, whether it's erev tchumen or erev chatzeres, as we explained in the Hakdama what these are? Hadliku was haner. So Isartem and Eravtem, you say it the lashon of question. The lashon she'ela d'shem lekvar osum, because maybe they did it already. Aval b'ner l'sheich l'meimer adlaktem es haner. You're not making a statement. If you would say, did you light the candles? Because you can just see if the candles are lit or not. Since these household preparations may not be done on Shabbos, one must remind his family to take care of them before Shabbos begins. Now, what is the halacha of Ben Hashmashas? So Ben Hashmashas is a huge sugya l'fnei atzmai. Over here, the Gemara is marich in the sugya of Ben Hashmashas, and also the Gemara is marich in the sugya of Ben Hashmashas. So savik chashecha, savik ein chashecha. During Ben Hashmashas on Friday, when there's a doubt whether it's dark or night, or not yet dark and it's still day. So ein ma'asrin es havadai, we may not take meiser or truma from definite tevel, food from which truma or meiser has definitely not been separated. Ve'ein matbilin es hakelim, and we may not immerse utensils in a mikvah to purify them from tumah. A keli that's tummy requires immersion in the mikvah in order to make it tahor. This immersion is asum d'rabbanan on Shabbos because of makah b'patish, because the havik a masakin kli, it's like you're fixing the keli. The is beinami shvus. There's also a shvus involved. Exer the rabbanon, they did not let it do it. The ein madlikin as said, so we may not light any lamps, since the Tana already said that even isurim the rabbanon apply during Ben Hashmashas. Chayyim says over parshat that lighting a lamp, which is a malacha deraisa, should be forbidden at this time. So some explain that the Mishnah to me that one may not even ask a goy to light a lamp for you during Ben Hashmashas. Each of these activities is either asam deraisa clearly, or strongly resembles a malacha deraisa, which are asur even during Ben Hashmashas when Shabbos may have already started. Aval, there are certain things that you're allowed to do Ben Hashmashas, although it would be asur on Shabbos itself. Ma'asur nesat mai. During Ben Hashmashas, we may take off meiser from Dmai, which is food bought from an Amarot, from which meiser may have already been separated. Ma'arvin, you may make an erev chatzeres to permit carrying items on Shabbos to and from a shared courtyard. V'taimnin es achamin, and we may insulate hot food so that it will remain hot on Shabbos. The Chachamim asked insulating food on Shabbos because they were concerned that if the food cools off, one might put it over a fire, which may be the chiyuv of oifer or mevashel. This concern does not apply during Ben Hashmashas because food cooked on Shabbos is usually still hot at this time. So although insulating food is forbidden on Shabbos, it's mutter during Ben Hashmashas. Ad kan Perek Beis.